Falling off the horse hurts time after time. Just because you've fallen off a horse 10 times doesn't
That's
mean that the 11th is not going to hurt.
that's right.
You just know how to prevent it better
Yeah.
and how to deal with it, but it still hurts.
Yeah.
So that's something that perhaps a lot of people think that it just gets easier, but it doesn't. You just get better at preventing and forecasting.
As some of you might be aware, I'm starting a new series on the podcast where I bring on founders and I get them to tell their stories. There's so many fascinating stories of founders starting and exiting companies, and I want to try to capture as many of those as I can here on the podcast. So today is one of my first for 2025, and we're going to get to hear from José Berlanga, real estate developer, author, and investor. And he's got a very interesting background and journey as an entrepreneur. I think that will be very relatable to a lot of you who are listening. So, Jose, welcome to the show.
Hello, Lee. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, in our pre-call, we were discussing, okay, well, how do we frame this out? How do we kind of give the listeners a roadmap for your life and successes as an entrepreneur? And what came from it was 40 years of nightmares equals a life of success.
Pretty much.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm really excited to hear your story and kind of start from the beginning and we'll kind of walk through some, it seems like through our initial discussions, you have a lot of wisdom to impart through failures more than successes. And I know that everybody listening can relate to failures.
Yes, absolutely. Every entrepreneur has to go through a little bit of pain, unfortunately.
So let's start at the very beginning. I think it's worth noting you weren't born in the U.S. Take us through that part of your life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was born in Mexico, and by the way, let me mention that I would sincerely hope that it doesn't take everybody 40 years to become successful and to achieve their goals. I've had a temporary success throughout all those decades where all of a sudden I was on top. I don't want to suggest that it took me 40 years to get somewhere. It just, I think finally after a few decades, I found some level of stability. But throughout those decades, I found great moments of success, periods of success where my businesses were thriving and growing and doing very well until they weren't. And that happens to all of us. It probably happened to me more often than to most people. And I'm probably unusually persistent and resilient to just keep going and starting all over again from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's my nature. I don't know if it's my stubbornness. I don't know if that was just my destiny or the circumstances. But yeah, I grew up in Mexico in a very difficult environment. I've experienced ups and downs, a little bit of I wouldn't call it poverty, but humble beginnings that teach you how to be frugal, how to manage the little that you have.
Mm-hmm.
My background growing up in Mexico was difficult after a very tough accident that I experienced where I was burned, 3rd-degree burns throughout my body, and that taught me probably just the meaning of tolerance and resilience and in fighting adversity and just dealing with a difficult journey that perhaps was the beginning of the learning lessons that came very handy, very helpful during my business career.
Yeah.
So if we fast forward, at some point, I had the opportunity to come to the U.S. to study, to go to college, and I couldn't wait. School was what I perceived to be an obstacle for me. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I thought I needed. But it's something that I just wanted to get out of the way. My family wanted me to have a degree as a first generation of a family member that could have the opportunity to have a degree. So I couldn't waste that opportunity, but it wasn't my priority. The moment I started going to college, I immediately started a business, because
Mhm.
that's really what I wanted. I wanted to make money. I wanted to become successful, and
Mhm.
I began to look for those opportunities, and one came very quickly, thanks to my dad, who was in the oil and gas business. He had been retired already, and he was in the industry of valves and piping and machinery for the oil and gas. So me landing in Houston, Texas, being the energy capital of the world, it was ideal. Where he
Mhm.
hooked me up, he put me in touch with some of his contacts, and we began this journey. He was afraid. One of the wonderful things about business is sometimes you can find someone that can complement, supplement some of those weaknesses. My father had a technical background and had been in business in this sector in Mexico, but he didn't speak English, and he was
Mhm.
not able to continue his business in Mexico. Things had changed, and me being here and speaking English gave us the confidence to utilize each other's talents to start this business, where we became international brokers, a purchasing
Ah,
agency for petrochemical plants in Mexico, where we were doing their acquisitions for maintenance, for parts.
okay.
So long story short, let's skip that. But the business began to grow very quickly and do very well. We began a very successful journey. But of course, the speed bumps came about as the economy changed, currency fluctuations in
Mhm.
Mexico. Our clients began to slow down with their ability to pay the bills, and this is where the initial experience of growing pains. Interestingly enough, this change of an economic circumstance came about as we were growing, and we
Mhm.
were hiring people, and we
Yeah.
were getting a little bit in debt, which brings us to the main subject: our timing.
Mhm.
Had it been when the business was in its early stages, maybe we wouldn't have had so much overhead, or we wouldn't have been so vulnerable.
Mhm.
Had it been later, maybe we would have had enough time to build enough reserves and enough.
Yeah.
But although it was a multi-million-dollar business, a lot of it was in infrastructure and equipment and receivables and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're rich on paper, and
Yeah,
that puts you in a very vulnerable position. So
for
that
sure.
was the case in that first business. Maybe one of the lessons I learned, that we misinterpret, because we never want to quit in business. We never want to stop,
Right.
and I never have. But perhaps in this particular experience, I should have walked away when we were still in a very good financial position, and
Mhm.
cashed out. Um, but
But
we
could you have known? I mean,
no.
looking back, could you have known that that was the right move?
It was very similar as something, let's say, as the pandemic or as a financial crisis, where you
Mhm.
think, no, somebody's going to come in and something is going to change quickly. Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
Right.
Let's invest more money. Let's keep growing. Let's find
Yeah.
more customers. Let's travel more. Let's hire more salespeople,
Mhm.
and let's do more in order to perhaps save ourselves from this situation, instead of saying, no, this is going to get real bad. So, no,
Well, yeah, and
you
I would say
could have
too,
forecasted it, but no, the
being
logic.
young and full of energy and passion, this is your first adventure.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it would seem like you were doing something so wrong by not charging for it and not trying to make more of the situation. So I don't see how you could have seen that that would be the right move at such an early age and early, for adventure.
Absolutely. I don't think that, particularly at that age, where you feel invincible and you think that you can
Yeah.
overcome any situation. So that wasn't the case here.
Yeah.
And little by little, we drained our savings, and our company went down, and I was out of business completely, having to start again. Thankfully, I was still very young, but darn, it hurt. It hurt. It was painful. It was difficult. Thankfully, I had built a lot of relationships in business. I had
Yeah.
contacts, I had friends, I had credibility, I had a good reputation. I had made some investments one of the questions I get asked often is, how did I get back on my feet? Um, and I had made, besides contacts, a couple of investments in restaurants and things
Hmm.
like that. And I ended up with some level of ownership in a couple of other businesses where basically I started, I mean, I depleted my savings and my capital, but I started from scratch and started little by little building up another business.
Yeah.
And a lot of things happened. A few years went by of pain and suffering and rebuilding things, and most of all mentally,
Hmm.
psychologically rebuilding your ability to become positive again and
Yeah.
thinking that things are going to do well.
So, how old were you at this time when the business failed?
I was my first failure, my first multi-million dollar fall happened
Hmm.
in my early 20s
Wow.
because I started my first business when I was barely 17 or 18.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. It was wonderful in retrospect. It was
In
horrible
retrospect.
at the time.
Right.
In retrospect, I was young enough to be able to recover quite well.
Yeah.
But there were more failures, more attempts. The second one, as I built some investments in including a chain of coffee houses and that became very valuable coffee bars and ice cream bars. We built a brand in a small franchise that was in the process of growing that was very valuable at the time. Here we go again with those famous growing pains.
Hmm.
A second time it catches me. Sorry, as we're building, opening stores, borrowing money, leveraging our company to open new locations.
Hmm.
Starbucks starts coming in like crazy into our market, opening places at every corner. And with our debt and with our overhead and with our growth, at that particular moment in time, we couldn't afford to lose sales and affect our percentages and
Yeah.
having to change our model. It hit us. The timing was awful
Mm.
for us to have experienced that level of overnight competition. We were one of the first coffee houses, as now there are endless of them. But we were one of the ones that had to educate the consumer
Yeah.
and have to come in and spend, back then,
Hmm.
$2 or $3 for a cup of coffee that people didn't quite understand, or
Yeah.
$2 or $3 for an ice cream. Where I'm talking about back in the '90s, where a dollar for coffee was already expensive
Right.
if you weren't the type of person that would just make your coffee at home.
Yeah.
So, but we opened that market and we educated the consumer and we grew. But here we go again, experiencing some tough, aggressive competition at the wrong time, where
Mm.
we needed every dollar to support our debt, all the money we had borrowed to open stores and to grow. And back then, we weren't familiar with institutional investors where we could get on limited funds to just grow this thing. We were doing it from within very organically.
Hmm.
And another example, and skipping all the details, we went out of business. We
Hmm.
started selling some stores, liquidating some, shutting some down because we just weren't able to make the payments, and little by little we had to get out of trouble. It took me a few years again to recover from this one. I invested several years just paying debt, just working to pay these debts, because one thing that in this country is important, unlike other countries, you can lose all your money, you can lose your capital, you can lose your business, but just don't file for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Figure out how to stay away from that, because that stays on your record for life. And once you get to that point, now it becomes very, very difficult to ever get back on your feet again. And
Right.
with all of my heart, I try to avoid uh, filing for bankruptcy. So I just paid, it worked for years to pay back some of this debt.
Wow.
And anyway, I got into other businesses and
Yeah.
so on and so
Well,
forth.
good for you for doing that. By the way, I mean that integrity, I think, I'm sure has played out and served you well later on in life. The network you've built, the partners you worked with. If everyone is rowing in the right direction and they see what's really happening, then that's going to play out for you in the long term. If I look back at these two stories now, what I'm seeing is an external threat in the market on this first one that kind of came out of nowhere. You're too young and really too passionate to see that you should get out of it, which I don't think anybody would have made that wiser decision. And then the second one here is competition. That's almost a different kind of threat than a market threat. So you're getting schooled in entrepreneurship in a whole new way.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I will say though, in both of these instances, so far what I've seen is you going full force at the concept, the idea, the business itself, not being timid. And I think, as we'll probably see play out here pretty soon, that is going to serve you well at some point in a success, because I mean, that if I were meeting with you then, knowing what I know now, I would say, hey, you gotta get back on the horse, because you've got everything it takes, but
Yeah.
you've had these derailments.
And that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand. When you experience failure like this, it's serving a purpose.
Yeah.
If you throw the towel and quit and just go and find a job, you're losing all of that experience. You're
Hmm.
losing all of those things that you experience that might help you improve your chances on the next try, on the
That's right.
next attempt. You're gaining so much experience, it doesn't feel like it at the
No.
time. I understand. It's
No.
extremely difficult at the time.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, yeah, going through a divorce or something like that, where you just don't want to go through that level of pain
Yeah.
or that experience again. But in business, if you have that personality, you just eventually want to try it again and keep going and tweaking your plan and
Hmm.
perfecting your plan and learning from those lessons. In that second experience, it was a combination of competition combined with leverage, combined with a lot of things that were going on at the same time. It was just a perfect storm to put us out of business.
Yeah.
And we learned it again. And by the way, in between those businesses, and I'm about to tell you the third attempt,
Yeah.
I had many other ones, other startups where I invested some money, where I
Yeah.
was more a silent investor,
Uh-huh.
a partner that almost for one reason or another, I mean, I was learning like crazy.
Yeah.
For example, how to not put your business in the wrong hands, or how to not operate a business without enough information.
Yeah.
And there are I began to understand the number of things that have to go right in order for a business to succeed.
Yeah.
Not one or two things, but it's a dish.
It's a lot.
It's a salad of ingredients that must come together in harmony in order for a
Yeah.
business to thrive and
That's a
succeed.
great analogy. I love that. Looking back at that second failure, those 3 years of you building back up and paying that money back, uh, I think for at least one person listening right now, they're in that situation and they're probably thinking, what is this all worth it? Should I just quit? Should I just go do something else? Just get a job?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about your mindset, and where you were at that time, and how did you come out of that to know you can move on to other things.
I think this is different for everyone, and I have to admit that my circumstances up until this point were very positive, because at this stage I'm still not married, I still have no children, I don't have that much of a financial responsibility. I'm just broke again,
Yeah.
and that is a level of freedom,
Yes.
although very scary, very painful, and excruciating, to lose millions of dollars and be worth nothing again, and not know where you're going to come up with a rent and things like that, and losing your home and losing all of these things. But at least uh, you can go to sleep knowing that you don't have a family to feed. That allowed me to continue to investigate business. That was one of the positives that I had,
Mm.
that I could afford. to continue living under a very limited budget, very frugally, and with nothing, and give it a shot. And while all of this is happening, the mindset, although it was difficult, it's humbling.
Mm-hmm.
One of the recommendations that I give to entrepreneurs that go through something like that is learn your new reality and understand that now you have to start again. It doesn't matter where. You're no longer on top. You're no longer the boss. You're no longer the leader. Start wherever a new opportunity comes.
Mm.
And I did that. I was never arrogant, or I never believed that I was more than I was. I knew that I was learning and that I needed to try again. And I was creating more relationships in credibility, and I was perhaps exposing myself to a lot of people that were watching what I was doing and how I operated. And I have to admit that although I was looking at in learning the subject of entrepreneurship, because that's something I want to touch on. I never became an expert on anything other than putting deals together.
Mm.
So I could switch from one industry. I became very versatile, where I could move from one industry to another because I understood finance, I understood banking, I
Yeah.
understood numbers, people, managing, hiring, training, all of the fundamentals of putting a business together. And the people around me understood that if they had a business that was struggling, they called me. And I did that. I helped others put their businesses together, sometimes even for free. And that took me a long way with a lot of relationships in the
Yeah.
business world. The next experience, interestingly enough, came when my younger brother graduated and became an architect. And with very little money between his know-how and mine in the business world, we started a construction company. We started a residential
Mm.
construction company. Now we're more fast forwarding to the late 90s. Um, Now I'm a little more seasoned, a little more savvy in the business world, trying to get back on my feet. But I have much more experience in the business world. I have much more to
Yeah.
bring to the table as to how to start and build a business. And we build it again from a very small investment, a very small bungalow,
Mm-hmm.
tiny inner city home that we build. And it's a long story. I wrote a book about how it all happened. The business of home building, which is the story as to how this business started and grew and developed. But a tiny amount of money, we turn it into $100+ million a year company. Um, until here we go again, 2008, and actually started a little early, 2007, the
Yeah.
financial crisis, the housing bubble.
We all remember
That
that.
yes, that again caught us way over leveraged,
Mm-hmm.
to the tune of 70-80 million dollars in debt, and
Mm-hmm.
a couple of hundred homes in lots in production, and a few $100,000 a month in overhead. And we had a very, very um, sophisticated infrastructure when our business went to zero
Yeah.
overnight.
Wow.
A new experience. Now, this is not an evaluation. This is not competition.
Yep.
This is not currency exchanges. This was just a
Yep.
mortgage situation. And I can continue with other experiences. We had other ones, but
Yeah.
somehow all of those lessons,
Yeah.
or the previous, let's call it 20 years
Mm-hmm.
of business experiences, helped me navigate through the 2008 financial crisis, where we lost millions. Most of our fortune was lost, but we were able to manage and surf through all of this horrible situation, because
Yeah.
we had the experience of how to navigate through these turbulent times. And we were very responsible when the years were strong.
Mm-hmm.
Saved a lot of money, had a lot of equity in all of our projects,
Yeah.
and that allowed us. So we although we were over leveraged, we also had a tremendous amount of equity in many developments that help us get through all of this. And again, we didn't have to go through bankruptcy, which we were one of the few
Yeah.
companies in our industry that didn't, other than the public companies that
Sure.
have unlimited resources and institutional funds to go to, and
Hmm.
we didn't. But we were literally one of the two or three companies that remain in business, and we were the largest one that remained in
Hmm.
business. We weren't large by the time it was all said and done. We had to start all over,
Yeah.
but we grew it again.
That's
And
amazing.
when as they say, if you're able to survive a crisis like that, it'll make you stronger. And it made our business stronger.
Oh
We
yeah.
grew very fast, and we recovered very quickly when all of this was behind
Yeah.
us.
And it probably galvanized your mindset then, especially you after those three, but you and your partners to say, if we can make it through this, then we really need to just, get on a rocket and go.
At that moment, you have no choice because you
That's
know
right.
that in neglecting or in ignoring the problems and the debt and the banks and the customers and the warranties and the employees and the payrolls and the contract, all the contracts that you have with different contractors,
Hmm.
ignoring them, it is a world of legal issues that we
Yeah.
just didn't want. So we just worked to pay, bring money to closings. When we were selling houses, we were actually, instead of the buyer bringing, we were bringing money because we were selling things upside down. And
Yeah.
it was a very, very tough time for
I
us,
bet.
where I didn't want to get out of bed for years, where it was just an excruciating time, but we made it through, and we didn't have a choice, by the way. I mean, it was, this is where you have to find the energy, the stamina, the resilience to just deal with one problem at a time,
Yeah.
and just start focusing on one day at a time, how to make it through today. You start forgetting, in periods like those, you stop thinking about the future and about growth and about systems and about procedures. You rebuild your strategy, you reconstruct your mindset from a long-term and growing mode, and operating your company, to survival mode.
Hmm.
What do I do today? What do I need to just get through today?
Yeah.
And if you have the ability to do that and manage that mentally, one day at a time, just like a marathon, one step at a time.
Yep.
By the one day you look back and you go, okay, I've covered some territory here. I'm getting somewhere. But to answer your question, I have to admit that, and again, everybody's different, but I'm gonna be humble enough, honest enough to tell you that it makes you stronger in the experience scenario, in the ability to handle and to know how to act and react, but not always emotionally. I mean, it still hurts, and you still experience the fears, the concerns, the sleepless nights.
Hmm.
After 40 years of dealing with this, I'm not going to tell you that I'm no longer worried about these issues and circumstances, or that I tell myself, oh, I've been through that, I can handle anything.
Hmm.
No, on the contrary, I'm every day I'm planning how not to have to go through those things, because
Yeah.
I know they will be painful again.
Yeah.
And it's particularly later on in life and at my age. And I don't want to go through all that again.
No.
I become a little more careful. It's not that I become stronger or more powerful,
Hmm.
or convince myself that I can get through anything. I can probably do that, but I don't want to. And that is part of the experience. Your um, your wisdom to prevent some of these things
Yes.
better each time
Yes.
is probably what matters and what counts and what changes. Because falling off the horse hurts time after time. Just because you've fallen off a horse 10 times doesn't
That's
mean that the 11th is not going to hurt.
that's right.
You just know how to prevent it better,
Yeah.
and how to deal with it, but it still hurts.
Yeah.
So that's something that perhaps a lot of people think that it just gets easier, but it doesn't. You just get better at preventing and forecasting. So
So you made it through the financial crisis, and it made you stronger. Now, where did your journey take you from there?
Well, it took me to first of all, that crisis forced us to keep going, to revive the business, to rebuild it. And next time around, I think we could have grown a lot more because we were one of the few players left in our industry, in our region. Um, and but we were much more cautious. We continued, and as a result, we began to diversify our business. We began to make other investments in real estate. Started going into more of multifamily and in commercial,
Mhm.
some income producing properties, land development, working deals with
Okay.
other developers, and so on and so forth, and started that business again, rebuilt it, and now we feel that at this point we have so much experience in handling some of this that we've become our company in itself has become very resilient to these ups and downs. Uh, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I'm almost hoping for those down cycles,
Hmm.
because that is also, once you have built enough resources and
Yeah,
reserves where you can make a lot of money out of those.
that's right.
But
Be
you have
prepared.
to, yeah, you have to already have had some success and some capital to take
Mhm.
advantage of those,
Yeah,
and
and
that's what
a
we are
lot
now.
of capital. I mean, you got to have a lot of resources to jump on those good deals.
Yeah, yeah. Now we are prepared. In good cycles we make some money, in bad cycles we take advantage of those opportunities, and
Yeah,
which we've had some
yeah,
recently. With interest rates, and it's gotten difficult in one area of our company, but now we have other areas that can benefit
yeah.
from those horrible moments and cycles that bring opportunities.
So
And
you're now at a point where you are fully into real estate development, investing. Is this kind of your domain now, or do you play in other domains?
no, I love to invest in other things. I invested in a couple of technology companies and a couple of startup companies, and mostly the bulk is real estate. That is where
Yeah,
my expertise. That is what I understand. I love to manage my own. I'm a control freak, as most entrepreneurs, and I like to manage my money and my own investments. I like
sure.
to control them. Yes, I may put a little bit of money here and there in other businesses, but the bulk of it is under my control.
Yeah,
And I love doing that. But now I'm shifting gears a little bit into writing, slowing down finally, and
yeah.
I'm beginning to have the opportunity to slow down a little bit for the first time in my life, without having to compromise my quality of life,
Hmm.
and begin to do things like writing books.
It's great.
I enjoy it. I enjoy the storytelling and putting my thoughts on, and organizing them, and telling
Yeah,
a little bit about my career.
that's awesome. What's the have you do you have a book out?
Yes, yes. The first one is out, The Business of Home Building,
Okay.
which is not about building homes, but it's about how to build a business through.
Yeah. Okay.
I tell the story through how I build a construction company, but it's more about how to start and build a company. Doesn't matter what the product is. I am about to publish a second book, which is more about real estate, land development, land investing,
Okay.
land speculating, and that's about to be published. And I'm in the middle of another one, which is about the mindset of an entrepreneur, the mentality, the psychology,
Yeah.
personality, some of the traits that all of us entrepreneurs share.
Yep.
Um, and I'm enjoying that process. I'm struggling a little bit because I still have a daytime job,
Hmm.
and that's always a challenge,
Sure.
to focus on doing some of your fun projects while
Hmm.
you still have some obligations and responsibilities. So
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And um, I know that there's a lot of value that's been translated here. So it's been an honor having you here. We'll put the links to your current book out And if we want to send people your way to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
joseberlanga.com, in all the normal links, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yep.
But I plan to have more stuff, more content pretty soon. I've neglected all those accounts, as I haven't been very much involved in social media, but
Yep.
I plan to pretty soon.
There you go. Okay, that's great. Well, thanks again. This has been great.
Thank you, Lee. I've really enjoyed being here with you.